Okay, let's unpack this then. Today, we're diving deep into a document that, even decades after it supposedly first came out, it's still sparking debate and honestly, for some people, real alarm.
Hmm.
Imagine a book so controversial, right, that some people just flat out dismissed it as a forgery, while others were actually scared to even, distribute it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're looking at today. A synthesis, or what's claimed to be a synthesis, of a Russian textbook on psychopolitics.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, is not just the content itself, which is chilling, but the context, the whole background of how it even appeared.
Right.
It got reprinted in 1982, but it first popped up way back in 1959. And the compilers, particularly this Charles Stickley, PhD, they claimed it was a synthesis of a genuine Russian textbook.
Hmm.
But the way it originated, I mean, we're dealing with something that right from the start presented itself as both, super secret and incredibly powerful.
He's so inherently mysterious.
Exactly. Stickley himself, in his introduction back in 55,
Yeah.
he basically said, look, I cannot entirely vouch for its authenticity, and that telling the sources would cause problems for them.
Right.
And he adds, the Soviet is not accustomed to the issuance of validations. So, boom, right away, you're told it's a synthesis, no verifiable sources, but presented with such conviction, you kind of have to pay attention.
Yeah, it draws you in. So our mission today really is to explore the claims within this text. I mean, it paints this incredibly detailed picture of a systematic art and science specifically designed for involuntary mind manipulation, for control.
Yeah.
It supposedly lays out this whole blueprint for a hidden war, like a quiet but constant fight for dominion over people's thoughts, their
Or
loyalties.
hidden more, yeah.
So as we go through this, what does it all mean for you listening as you try to make sense of all the information, all the influence that we're bombarded with every day? I mean, the intro to the 82 reprint sets this really high bar, almost conspiratorial, doesn't it?
It does. It says, the existence of the systematic use of psychopolitics has a direct relation to a geopolitical war which was declared against established institutions many years ago, and that this movement, never publicly acknowledged, shows activists on the, quote, Fabian socialist communist left, presenting a united front against traditional forms of social organization.
Wow, okay. So it's framing it immediately as part of a much larger undeclared conflict.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking at how this document defines psychopolitics, the really audacious goals it sets out, and the, frankly, chilling and often brutal methods it claims can be used to achieve this conquest of the mind, as they call it.
Conquest of the mind, yeah.
And this brings up a really important question for us, I think. Regardless of where it actually came from, who really wrote it, what does a document like this tell us about those deep-seated fears, those anxieties around mind control, societal influence back in the mid-20th century?
And maybe even how they still resonate today, right?
Exactly, how they echo now. Because the original intro, it implies that this stuff, however unbelievable it sounds, was already happening. It specifically points to almost total non-resistance to official implementation of a system of management and control in defiance of law and tradition as proof that psychopolitics, as laid out right here, was valid.
So not just theory, it's presented as an active field report.
Pretty much. An ongoing operation.
Okay, so the document itself, it doesn't waste any time setting up this really alarming premise. It jumps right into how it was first received, the controversies.
Right.
When the American Public Relations Forum first published it, it says it defied acceptance. That's a pretty strong statement, isn't it? People couldn't even wrap their heads around it.
Absolutely. It suggests the ideas were just so out there, so outside the norm of the time, people struggled to even, acknowledge they could be possible.
Yeah.
And the text claims that liberals called it a forgery, supposedly ignoring the implications in that term, while conservatives apparently limited how much it got around because they were fearing a loss of credibility.
So, according to the document, both sides kind of missed the point or were afraid to touch it.
That's the narrative it builds, yeah. That either they were too naive or maybe too cautious to really see the threat, which, ironically, would enable the very thing the document claims to expose.
Right, it's a clever setup.
It implies the sheer audacity of it all, made it hard to grasp, letting these alleged operations just continue, almost hiding in plain sight. It's a classic rhetorical move, really. If you doubt it, you're either ignorant or maybe even complicit.
And then comes this really bold claim that psychopolitics was then operative, actively being used back in the 1950s, and its future was supposedly being secured by a cadre of adepts who had long before captured the citadels of learning.
Yeah, the universities, the institutions.
So again, not just a theory book, it's presented as this live, ongoing thing already embedded deep in society, especially academia. It points to things like altered perceptions of values, morality, responsibility, loyalty, and that almost total non-resistance to new forms of control as proof that it's real and working.
It's practically boasting, isn't it? Saying, look how successful we've already been, suggesting this quiet, ideological takeover was already well underway.
Wow.
And the foreword to the booklet itself, it has this really confrontational, almost mocking tone. It says, basically, this booklet will sound so fantastic you are likely to put it down in disgust, exclaiming, this is something out of science fiction. It could never happen in America.
Daring you to disbelieve it.
Exactly. But then it immediately hits back with, every page of it is now possible in this country. There is a bill that legalizes page after page.
And that's referring to mental health laws.
Directly, claiming they allow for the incarceration of sane Americans, including our legislators. And then it gives this really specific, very disturbing example.
Oh, yeah, the governor's story.
Right. A governor supposedly drugged unconscious, flown across state lines, committed in Texas. It calls it unconstitutional, but claims it was somehow legalized. It mentions conflicting newspaper reports, making it hard to know the truth.
Which plays right into the confusion theme.
Precisely. But it uses that ambiguity to say statements from other senators painted a horrible picture of what can happen legally to our own representatives. The implication is stark. Even the powerful aren't safe, and the legal system itself has been twisted.
And it doesn't stop there, does it? It claims this is possible in every state.
Yeah, it claims every U.S. state reportedly had legislation allowing for this kind of thing, and it urges immediate nullification. It says, and this is a direct quote, our legislators have not begun to worry about the kind of bills they have enacted into law, but unless these bills are nullified immediately, no American is secure.
That's a direct call to action, framed as an existential threat.
Absolutely, but then it gets even more specific, more insidious. It claims that few, IFAY, of wealthy people in America are without their psychopolitician.
Their personal mind controller, essentially.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
Politicians, judges, lawyers, powerful people, even like club officers. The psychopolitician supposedly becomes this loyal and trusted friend, maybe even a relative.
Wow.
Making the target totally dependent on their advice, but ultimately guiding them to support the other side.
And the key warning, the recurring theme is,
when confusion reigns supreme, the communists make their greatest inroads, disorient society, create uncertainty, sow distrust. That's the primary weapon. It's not about bombs and bullets. It's a warped perception of information.
okay, so that sets the stage. And then it brings in Beria, Lavrentiy Beria, head of the Soviet secret police.
Yes, it presents what it claims is an address by Beria to American students. Specifically, it says professors, teachers, psychologists, nurses, social welfare workers, people allegedly sent to Russia starting back in 1933.
Sent to Russia for training in this.
That's the claim. It even cites the Reese Committee reports as supposed proof that Americans were sent to Russia, trying to give it this veneer of factual grounding.
Right, lending it credibility.
It gives it that insider feel, like this is the actual instruction manual from the top bad guy. And Beria's main goal, according to this alleged address, is crystal clear. To produce a maximum of chaos in the culture of the enemy is our first most important step.
Chaos is the goal.
Our fruits are grown in chaos, distrust, economic depression, and scientific turmoil. Instability breeds opportunity. The more confused society is, the easier it is to achieve their aims.
And a key part of creating that chaos is dominating mental healing.
Exactly. Beria supposedly tells these students to recruit and use all the agencies and facilities of mental healing until the entire field of mental science is entirely dominated by communist principles and desires.
So weaponizing therapy.
Completely. Turning a healing discipline into a tool for control.
Yeah.
And to do that, they have to crush any homegrown healing methods. It says, actual teachings of Freud, James, Eddy, and others amongst your misguided peoples must be swept away.
Get rid of the competition.
Discredit them, defame them, arrest them, stamp them out. Every psychology teacher, it instructs, must teach only communist doctrine under the guise of psychology. It's a total ideological takeover of a whole field, twisting healing into ideological reprogramming.
That's audacious. And it extends to controlling actual individuals, too, leaders.
Oh yeah. The stated goal is dominion over the minds and bodies of every important person in your nation. This includes discrediting statesmen how? By labeling them insane.
Neutralizing them publicly.
Right. So they couldn't, again, be given credence by his people. Once you're declared mentally unfit, your influence is gone, the public is left rudderless, and it gets darker. It explicitly advocates working until suicide arising from mental imbalance is common and calls forth no general investigation or remark.
Normalizing suicide.
Making it seem like just another unfortunate statistic, not a societal alarm bell, eroding public concern, making people numb to it.
And the view of mental institutions.
Ah,
It's pretty grim.
grim is an understatement. They're not hospitals. They're prisons which can hold 1 million persons without civil rights or any hope of freedom. State-sanctioned detention, basically.
Wow.
And it claims shock treatment and brain surgery must be made to be common and accepted, saying point-blank these treatments destroy the memory and causes him to become a true mental patient.
Destroying memory.
It even references a specific anti-communist bulletin from '55 trying to tie the introduction of shock treatments in the U.S. to a doctor with alleged pro-communist background.
Connecting the dots, whether they're real or not.
Exactly. Sowing distrust in Main Street Edison, framing it as part of this foreign plot.
And it brings up shock treatment on children, too, citing a psychiatric journal.
It does. It cites Dr. Hild Moss, the American Journal of Psychiatry from 1958. It claims diagnoses like schizophrenic were often wrong, that these kids couldn't function after treatment and were later discharged with behavior disorder. It quotes Moss directly. In practically all of them, the diagnosis was wrong.
That's a startling claim from a professional journal.
It is. And the document uses this to pivot to juvenile delinquency, arguing kids committing crimes were being misdiagnosed as schizophrenic and institutionalized, putting the focus on some inherent illness instead of social issues.
Shifting the blame.
Right. And then it makes the incredible claim that children of all ages are being subjected to lobotomies on the same basis. It's a profoundly disturbing accusation against the entire psychiatric system of the time, suggesting a deliberate attack on the minds of the young.
And just when you think it can't get more shocking, it dives into sex education. From age 2.
Yeah, ages 2, 3, 4, 5. With instructions like, bathe them together and teach them what their organs are for. It even suggests demonstrating intercourse to preschoolers, with this chillingly detached advice about telling kids mother and father are sometimes alone then.
That's deeply uncomfortable.
And it brushes off kids experimenting as just a very human characteristic. It cites a specific source for this too, a booklet by James L. Himes, Jr. from the California Society for Mental Hygiene. So it's presented not just as an idea, but as something being actively promoted by mental health organizations.
So it's framing this early, explicit education as a way to break down traditional norms.
Exactly. Dismantling family structures, traditional morality right from the start, conditioning kids to a new, state-approved view of sexuality.
And it continues this theme with older kids and adults.
Oh, yes. It claims books like Human Growth and films for 5th, 6th graders leave absolutely nothing is left to the imagination. And another booklet supposedly tells parents and teachers masturbation is normal.
Okay.
But the really controversial part is the claim that abnormal sexual relations advocated by scientists and physicians who were told that abnormality is now normal. It cites that American Journal of Psychiatry article again about a novel promoting lesbian activity.
Right.
And then it quotes this unnamed spokesman for science, supposedly a former chief psychologist in New Jersey, insisting that men unwilling to try sex with other men are victims of psychiatric illness.
Wow. Pathologizing traditional views.
Precisely. It connects this directly to the experts who will decide your mentality, claiming one even said every American is mentally ill to some degree. The implication is blatant. Redefine sanity, redefine morality, normalize what was abnormal, pathologize resistance. That's how you control people.
Okay, so that's the groundwork. Then it talks about eliminating enemies.
Directly. You can cripple the efficiency of leaders by striking insanity into their families through the use of drugs, or wipe them away with testimony as to their insanity, or even bring about insanity itself when they seem too restive.
Targeted psychological warfare.
Absolutely. Attacking leaders through their families, their mental state. And the overarching goal is always changing loyalties. Given a short time with a psychopolitician, you can alter forever the loyalty of a soldier, or a statesman, or you can destroy his mind.
Destroy the mind.
It acknowledges threats to psychopolitics like finding cures, public outcry, or ministers getting involved in mental healing. But it claims these can be fought by leveraging, basically, capitalism's own flaws. Capitalistic thirst for control, capitalistic inhumanity, and a general public terror of insanity.
Turning the system against itself.
Exactly. Use the courts, Judges,
Yeah.
the Constitution, medical societies, laws, use it all to further their ends. Affect your own legislation at will, it says, and finance it all using the capitalist himself by his own appropriations, gathered through these front healing societies and fear campaigns.
Subversion from within, funded by the target.
It's presented as brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the end goal, according to this alleged Beria address, stark, brutal. By psychopolitics, create chaos, leave a nation leaderless, kill our enemies, and bring to earth through communism the greatest peace man has ever known.
Peace through total control and elimination of enemy.
The means justified by this utopian vision, however brutal they are.
Okay, so after that supposed speech, the textbook itself starts, Chapter 1. How does it formally define this? Psychopolitics.
It calls it the art and science of asserting and maintaining dominion over the thoughts and loyalties of individuals, officers, bureaus, and masses, and crucially, the effecting of the conquest of enemy nations through mental healing.
Through mental healing, wow.
It claims this isn't some new invention, but a natural outgrowth of practices as old as man. Like it's just perfecting an ancient craft of manipulation.
Okay, but what about ethics? I mean,
Right.
surely.
Nope. The document addresses it head-on, basically by dismissing it entirely. It states flatly there is no ethical problem since it's obvious and evident that man is always coerced against his will to the greater good of the state.
No ethical problem, full stop.
Full stop. Individual will, personal ethics, irrelevant. Only the state's good matters. Any means necessary or justified. It's a complete inversion of individual rights, presented not as radical, but as rational, self-evident. That's the moral foundation for everything that follows.
Okay, here's where it gets, I think, really foundational and deeply disturbing. It doesn't just talk politics. It redefines what a human being is. Man as a political organism. Chapter 2 lays this out, right?
Yeah, the constitution of man as a political organism. It sets this philosophical groundwork that's as strategic as it is chilling.
So what's the core idea?
It presents this analogy compelling but, deeply unsettling. Man isn't an individual. He's a colonial aggregation of cells.
Like a collection of cells, not a person.
Right. Sickness in the body. That's disloyalty of an organ. It uses the heart as an example. If the heart becomes disaffected, the whole body is disrupted by its revolutionary activity.
No.
And similarly, for the state, all the political parts have to cooperate for the greater good. Otherwise, the state just falls asunder and die.
So the individual is just a cell in the state organism.
Exactly. And it extends this even further. The whole earth is an organism. Races and nations are its organs.
Yes.
And putrescent illness of capitalist states threatens the whole planet unless they're brought into loyalty and obedience.
That framework basically redefines dissent as disease, right? As infection.
Precisely. It's not disagreement. It's a literal sickness threatening the whole collective. It totally dehumanizes the individual to justify complete control.
And what does that mean for the average person then?
Well, the average individual is seen as incapable in their natural state, like barbarians of the jungle. So they must be trained into a coordination of his organic functions by exercise, education, and work.
So no inherent worth, just raw material to be molded.
That's the idea. And then it goes right after core Western values. The tenets of rugged individualism, personal determinism, self-will, imagination, and personal creativeness. All these things in the masses are antipathetic to the good of the greater state.
Not just bad, but...
Illnesses. They're actual illnesses leading to disaffection, disunity. So your independent thought, your creativity, your willpower, those are pathologies. They need to be cured.
That's incredible. And they believe people are easy to control.
Oh yeah, the constitution of man lends itself easily and thoroughly to certain and positive regulation from without of all its functions, including those of thinkingness, obedience, and loyalty. Basically, humans are programmable.
Wow.
And anyone acting with self-willed greed is like a virus and germ spreading sickness in the state. So the mission of psychopolitics. First, to align the obedience and goals of the group, and then maintain their alignment by the eradication of the effectiveness of the persons and personalities which might swerve the group toward disaffection.
Eradication, not persuasion.
Eradication. Identify and eliminate dissenters, psychologically.
And it even says dissent makes you sick. Like thinking critically is bad for your health.
Pretty much. If you're troubled by conflicting propaganda or permitted to think thoughts critical of the state or question authority, you're constitution to suffer. Critical thinking is a vulnerability.
Unbelievable. And it dismisses regular psychotherapy.
Yeah, it calls it an Alice in Wonderland voyage into the subconscious that's singularly lacking in success. It contrasts that with hypnotism's direct command to be well. It clearly prefers brute force obedience, direct programming.
Because humans are just adaptable.
Peculiarly adapted to realignment of loyalties, it says. Capitalist workers are improperly and incorrectly loyal, leading to epidemics, illnesses, mass neuroses. Psychopolitics is the cure, eradicating the self-willedness of perverted leaders to restore the state's health.
Okay, so if we're just parts of this larger organism, this economic machine, how does that play out day to day? Chapter 3, man as an economic organism, dives into that, right? With a pretty cynical view of human desire.
Deeply cynical, yeah. It argues man is an economic organism driven by needs and desires, but with this peculiarity of exaggerating some of these beyond the bounds of reason. And psychopolitics jumps right on that exaggeration.
To manipulate those desires for the state.
Yeah, exactly. Not for individual fulfillment, but for state goals.
And how does it view economics in our lives?
It claims 1/10 of a man's life is concerned with politics and 9/10 with economics. But here's the twist. Excess stuff, having too much, causes unrest and disquiet. It dulls your wits, your awareness. A glut. Too much abundance is a menace.
Why a menace?
Because it reduces your awareness of others, of the environment. It makes you complacent, less controllable, less effective as part of the group. Prosperity isn't good, it's a strategic weakness.
That's a perverse view of wealth.
Totally. And it argues both extremes. Glut, excessive wealth, and too long privation, poverty, can create insanity or mental imbalance.
Providing a scientific reason to control both the rich and the poor.
You got it. And it suggests a psychopolitical tactic is like alternating high and low pressure in a chamber, creating chaos wherein the individual will cannot act. For a whole country, the strategy is chillingly direct. Remove the greedy by whatever means, and must then create and continue a semi-privation in the masses in order to command and utterly control the nation.
Engineer instability to break people down.
Engineer instability, foster dependence. It's not just policy, it's psychological warfare through economics.
And propaganda is key to managing this engineered instability.
Absolutely essential. You have to keep feeding the masses continuous hope for prosperity, lots of dreams and visions of glut of commodity.
The carrot.
Right. But that hope must be counterplayed against the actuality of privation and the continuous threat of loss in case of disloyalty.
The stick.
Constant psychological pressure. Keep them hopeful, but anxious and subservient. And in a nation targeted for conquests such as America, it says psychopolitics should exploit the natural cycles of booms and depressions inherent in capitalistic nations.
How so?
During a boom, use propaganda to highlight the wealth going to a selected few, to stir up resentment and divorce their control. During a depression, blame the avarice of a few and the political incompetence of leaders, always directing anger.
And it makes a specific claim about income tax, calls it Marxist.
Boldly asserts income tax, a Marxist principle smoothly slid into capitalistic framework in 1909 in the United States. Claims without proof it was against the basic law, and then says a communist agent's job is to suborn tax agencies to create the maximum disturbance and chaos using the law itself.
Weaponizing the tax system.
It's a prime example of the strategy. Don't attack overtly, infiltrate and weaponize existing structures from within. And the rich, the financially savvy, the well-informed in government, they're prime targets.
Why them specifically?
Because they're the ones who could halt or corrupt communist economic programs. They're obstacles. So psychopoliticians need to take them off the board.
Take them off the board.
Not targeting their families. It suggests families of the powerful are often deranged from idleness and glut. Use that or create it. Normal health and wildness of a rich man's son must be twisted and perverted and explained into neurosis, and then, assisted by a timely administration of drugs or violence, turned into criminality or insanity.
Create a crisis to get access.
Exactly. Then a mental healing expert gets close, gains confidentiality, and exploits it. And the ultimate fate for these elites, chillingly specific. When the time comes to do away forever with the rich or influential man, to administer the proper drug or treatment to bring about his complete demise in an institution as a patient or dead as a suicide.
Just eliminate them, disguised as illness or suicide.
Calculated systematic elimination, masked by medicine.
And this chapter ends with that redefinition of war, right? Not just soldiers and machines.
Yes. The capitalist does not know the definition of war. They think force, soldiers, machines. But this document argues a more effective, if somewhat longer, war can be fought with bread, or, in our case, with drugs and the wisdom of our art.
So war becomes psychological, Economic.
A subtle, pervasive campaign. The battlefield isn't land, it's the human mind, society's internal systems. A truly chilling shift in thinking about conflict if you take it seriously.
Okay, so if the individual is just this controllable organism, a part of the collective, the next step is setting goals for that collective, right? State goals. Chapter 4 gets into that. Enforcing them.
Right, state goals for the individual and the masses. And it really hammers home how behavior is controlled. It emphasizes that all goals proceed from duress.
Duress, not freedom or aspiration.
Nope, flat out rejects that. Without force and threat, there can be no striving. Without pain, there can be no escape from pain. Without the threat of punishment, there can be no gain. It's a really stark, almost primal view of what motivates people.
So the state has to use force.
It must rigorously codify and enforce its goals. If you don't obey, the masses suffer. Any interruption, any deviation is just chalked up to self-willedness, of greed, of idleness, or of rugged individualism.
Those illnesses again.
Exactly. It's possible to remove his self-willed tendencies for the good of the whole. It even targets, like, factory foremen, people in supervisory roles, for having disaffecting independency because they might have too much idle time. Psychopolitics can fix that.
Wow. So freedom is an obstacle. Cooperation means enforced compliance.
That's the core message.
Which leads us, I think, to the absolute heart of this whole text, breaking and rebuilding loyalties. Chapter 5, an examination of loyalties. This really exposes the mechanics they propose, doesn't it?
It really does. It lays it all bare. It defines loyalty simply as alignment with communist state goals. Disloyalty, that's misalignment, which includes democratic alignment.
So believing in democracy makes you disloyal.
According to this text, yes. And it claims loyalty isn't spiritual or principled, it's entirely a thing of dependence, economic or mental. No inherent value.
So easily manipulated.
That's the premise. The cure of disloyalty is just to align the purposes of the individual toward the goals of communism. And the analogy it uses here is truly disturbing. It compares it to treating a rebellious body organ. Mild shock of the electric variety can, and does, produce the recooperation of a rebellious body organ. It claims it's the shock and punishment of surgery or x-rays that works, not any therapeutic value. Electric shock provides punishment value for a greater cooperative attitude.
Reducing people to biological mechanisms you just shock into line, pain is the teacher.
Pain is the primary tool. Total compliance through suffering.
And it details specific methods for getting rid of existing loyalties.
Two main approaches. Method 1 is milder, using duress and false evidence. You indoctrinate the person that their old loyalty was to an unworthy source. By creating circumstances, putting them under duress, and then feeding them false evidence that the person or thing they were loyal to is actually causing their suffering. It also involves defaming the individual to their own superiors or government, making them feel rejected and isolated.
Psychological dismantling, patiently done.
Right. It requires time, concentration, the manufacture of false evidence, and a psychopolitical operator's time. Meticulous and patient.
And the second method, less mild, I assume.
Much less mild. Used in moments of expediency. It's about eradicating the personality itself.
Eradicating the personality, how?
Using shock, surgery, duress, privation, and in particular, implantation. With the technologies of neo-hypnotism. It requires defaming the old loyalties and implanting new ones.
Implantation, like programming.
Exactly. And it makes the shocking claim that mass neo-hypnotism can alter the loyalties of an entire nation, something it says was effectively accomplished among the less usable states of Russia.
Wow. And it justifies using these extreme methods.
Oh, completely. It posits that any man who cannot be persuaded into communist rationale is to be regarded as somewhat less than sane, and it is therefore completely justified to use the techniques of insanity upon the non-communist.
Dissent isn't just wrong, it's mental illness, requiring violent treatment.
That's the terrifying logic.
And for important people, those with influence, the methods get even sneakier.
More insidious, yeah. If persuasion fails, it recommends emotional duress or electric shock or brain surgery. For the really important ones, more delicate technologies to keep them and everyone around them unaware of the operation, like a simple implantation with a hidden command.
Undetectable manipulation.
But even more recommended, it says, is to target people they're emotionally close to. His wife or children normally furnish the best targets, and these can be operated against without restraint.
Targeting families, that's evil.
It shows a complete disregard for human connection. Attack the most vulnerable points to control the powerful individual.
And this leads to the idea of the psychopolitical slave subject.
Horrifying concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Using electric shock, surgery, sexual attack, drugs, or other useful means to degrade or totally alter someone's personality. Creating this slave who, on command or signal, will perform outrageous actions, discrediting the main target or subtly demanding things the operator wants.
Using people as puppets to destroy others.
Exactly. And if loyalty just cannot be changed, the advice is to occasion a mild neurosis, create a history of mental imbalance, and then see to it that he disposes of himself by suicide.
Drive them to suicide.
And the document boasts audaciously that psychopolitical operators have done this tens of thousands of times and without Russia. The sheer depravity, especially using sexual attack as a tool for control and memory erasure, it just underscores the complete lack of any moral compass in this text. It's a blueprint for absolute domination.
And the stigma around insanity itself is a key weapon.
Absolutely central. The person to be destroyed must be involved at first or second hand in the stigma of insanity. Why? Because insanity itself is a despised and disgraced state, and anything connected with it is lightly viewed.
So accusations against the operators won't stick.
People are too afraid of insanity to investigate anything near it, the document claims. And crucially, in capitalist countries, an insane person has no rights under law. No property rights, can't testify. It calls this an excellent road to render people powerless.
Just convince the public someone's sanity is questionable.
And you can discount and eradicate everything they do or stand for.
And it even suggests redefining paranoia.
This is one of the most disturbing parts. Twisting a clinical diagnosis for political ends. It should become the definition of insanity, of the paranoid variety, that a paranoid believes he is being attacked by communists.
So anyone criticizing communism is automatically paranoid, automatically insane.
Instantly discredited. Support just falls away. It's a brilliant, evil manipulation of psychiatry.
And it outlines how to destroy other loyalties, too. To self, family, friends.
Systematically.
Yeah.
Destroy self-loyalty by showing them errors, making them doubt their memory, their actions, their own judgment. Destroy family loyalty by making the family economically independent of each other, lessening the value of marriage, making divorce easy, having the state raise the kids.
Undermining the family unit.
Completely. Destroy loyalty to friends and community by lowering trust, arranging for false reports against them by neighbors or authorities, fostering suspicion, isolation.
And for young people, how do they target their loyalty to the state?
By creating resentment. Put all manner of forbiddings for youth into effect to disenfranchise them, make them feel restricted, misunderstood. Then offer communism as the alternative, promising a better lot.
Create the problem, then offer the solution.
Classic strategy. It advocates creating chaos in youth, deny them easy access to courts, destroy the home, encourage delinquency, force practices that separate kids from their families.
And the methods for that are shocking.
Truly. Make readily available drugs, give teens alcohol, praise wildness, stimulate them with sex literature and practices from the sex bowl, all to create chaos, idleness, and worthlessness. And into that void, cast communism as the answer, offering complete freedom everywhere.
It also mentions using unpopular wars and conscription.
Yeah, promote unpopular wars to keep conscription going, framing it as a barrier to the progress of youth, making them cynical about patriotism about their own country.
And what about youth leaders, the influential ones?
If you want to use them, their character must be altered carefully into criminal channels, then controlled through blackmail, if they resist. Harass them. Get them into the juvenile system where a psychopolitical operator can destroy the sanity of that person.
Target the best and brightest if they won't comply.
Especially brilliant scholars, athletes, and youth group leaders, because they have influence. And the juvenile courts themselves. Prime targets for infiltration.
How?
Find or create judges or policemen with strange appetites. Make young girls and boys available to them in jails or detention homes, then use flash cameras or witnesses for blackmail.
That's horrifying.
The goal is to shift the focus from crime to mental problems, creating vacancies for psychopolitical operatives to fill. This gives them total control of the criminal, without whose help a revolution cannot ever be accomplished.
Using the criminal element.
And it extends even to the military. Get authorities on the mind embedded, and the armed forces of the nation then enter into our hands as solidly as if we commanded them ourselves. It's an incredibly comprehensive plan for total societal infiltration.
Okay, so if loyalties are rewritten, individuals are programmable, then obedience just follows, right? Chapter 6, the general subject of obedience, gets into how that's actually secured.
Yeah, and it makes a very stark claim, rejecting any idea of human dignity or free will in the process.
What's the claim?
That obedience is the result of force, period. It asserts that the most barbaric, unrestrained, brutal use of force, if carried far enough, invokes obedience. Displaying an inhuman attitude, it claims, grants you possession of force because it shows you have no empathy, no hesitation.
So brutality is the key.
The document is explicit. If you would have obedience, you must have no compromise with humanity. If you would have obedience, you must make it clearly understood that you have no mercy. Man is an animal. He understands. Only those things which a brute understands.
Completely dehumanizing. Reducing people to animals responding only to pain and fear.
That's the core philosophy.
And this links back to hypnosis through brutality.
Directly. Only when a person has been beaten, punished, and mercilessly hammered can hypnotism upon him be guaranteed in its effectiveness. It dismisses Western ideas that only 20% are susceptible as very untrue. It claims, given enough punishment, all the people are susceptible to hypnotism.
All people, if you torture them enough?
That's the assertion. It suggests methods like drugs, electric shock, even amputation of the functioning portions of the animal man's brain to render him null and void and no longer a menace, to induce unconsciousness or hypnosis for implanting commands.
Destroy the mind to control the body.
That's the blueprint.
And people can be made to believe anything under these conditions.
Made to believe anything which is administered to them with sufficient brutality and force. And it positions the psychiatrist as aptly suited to this role because their brutalities are committed in the name of science and seem complex. Their word on sanity is final.
And they have no interest in actual cures.
No interest in therapeutic means or cures, it says. The goal is to increase the number of insane people, operate in an atmosphere of emergency that excuses things like electric shock, the prefrontal lobotomy, transorbital leucotomy, and other operations it claims were long practiced on political prisoners in Russia.
Normalizing extreme violence as science while dismissing actual therapy.
Exactly. And a key directive.
Yeah.
A level of brutality must, at all costs, be maintained. This ensures their absolute judgment over sanity, maintaining their power. It also advocates infiltrating education, controlling psychology classes to reform future leaders from an early age.
And the ultimate goal is unthinking obedience.
Commands implanted below the thinking processes, acting without conscious thought. The document chillingly states that hypnotized people will perform immoral acts or acts harmful to themselves, despite the common belief they won't, a belief the operatives must reinforce in public to maintain cover.
Keep the public blind to the possibility.
Right. And the defense of psychopolitics. It relies on continuous protest from authoritative sources that such things are not possible. If an operative is exposed, declare the whole thing a physical impossibility, or brand them a hoax and laugh them out of countenance.
Deny, ridicule, dismiss.
And ideally, place a psychiatric advisor in every government operation. All suspicions get referred to them, no action is taken, and the communist goal can be achieved. It highlights how crucial embedded agents are for deflecting scrutiny.
Okay, so if unthinking obedience is the aim, and humans are just stimulus response animals, how do you actually do that, practically? Chapter 7, Anatomy of Stimulus Response Mechanisms of Man, gets into the real nitty-gritty, doesn't it? And it's deeply unsettling stuff.
Deeply. This chapter states flat out, man is a stimulus response animal. Reasoning, ethics, morals all depend on this basic mechanism. It credits Pavlov's work explicitly as its scientific foundation.
So the strategy is?
To install the stimulus into the mental anatomy that reacts to an external command. Often this stimulus causes pain if the command is disobeyed.
Pain as an internal policeman.
Exactly. It gives this chilling example. Beat someone while telling them to obey certain officials. In the future, the moment they start to disobey, they'll feel the beginnings of the pain. The implanted pain enforces compliance, even when no one's watching.
And it uses that horse-breaking analogy.
Yeah, the Cossack method, smashing vodka between the horse's ears for instant, permanent obedience. It argues light punishments don't work well, but sufficient brutality brings about an obedient horse.
Applying animal training logic to humans.
It clearly shows the document's core belief. Extreme pain, extreme shock are the most effective tools for instilling obedience and eliminating resistance in animals or humans. Complete subjugation of will.
And what's the optimum circumstance for this conditioning?
When the person obeys, no suffering. Disobey. The stimulus punishes them. This internal police mechanism works even thousands of miles away, and resistance is lowest when the person has insufficient food and is weary.
Exploit physical vulnerability.
Right. Administer stimuli during privation and exhaustion. Deny sleep, deny food. That creates the optimum state for receiving implanted stimuli, making them highly susceptible to reprogramming.
Which leads to this pain drug hypnosis, or PDH.
Exactly. The state where when an individual is weary and in a state of exhaustion, and if he is drugged or shocked and beaten and given a string of commands, his loyalties themselves could be definitely rearranged.
Rearranging loyalties through trauma.
That's the essence. It stresses that psychopoliticians must study hypnotism, post-hypnotic suggestion, that forgotten mechanism of implanting commands in the unconscious. And they need to practice.
On who?
On criminals and prisoners or inmates, induce trances with drugs, drive home suggestions with pain administered to the drugged person, then meticulously study their reactions when they wake up.
Practicing torture and manipulation on vulnerable populations.
And the training includes verifying the efficacy of brain surgery in disabling the non-responsive prisoner. But maybe the most horrifying instruction,
if that's possible,
is for operatives to practice exercises in sexual attack on patients. Why? To demonstrate the inability of the patient under pain drug hypnosis to recall the attack while indoctrinating a lust for further sexual activity on the part of the patient.
That's beyond words. Inducing specific perversions.
Sexual lust, masochism, and any other desirable perversion can be induced by pain drug hypnosis, it claims. It's framed not just as control, but as a weapon for the breaking down of family relations and consequent public disgraces for the psychopolitical target.
Using sexual trauma to create blackmail and destroy families.
It's a comprehensive system of abuse. Break individuals, erase memories, create programmable slaves, gather blackmail, all part of the training.
And how do they hide these horrific methods?
Masking. The simplicity of pain drug hypnosis, shock injections, should be masked entirely by technical nomenclature, the protest of benefit to the patient, by an authoritarian pose and position, and by carefully cultivating governmental positions.
Hide behind jargon and authority.
Exactly. Keep the true nature hidden behind a facade of science and medicine. And in universities, psychopoliticians should limit what they teach in psychology classes, only transmitting the tenets of communism under the guise of psychology, not the full stimulus response mechanics. Keep the real secrets for fellow operatives.
Selective indoctrination. Keep the inner circle informed.
Right.
Okay, then Chapter 8 talks about degradation as another core method.
Degradation, shock, and endurance.
Right.
Yeah, it's about reducing a nation's and an individual's ethical tone. Breaking the spirit before breaking the body, making people more pliable.
How?
It asserts degradation and conquest are companions. Defamation is the best and foremost weapon. Consistent, continual defamation of leaders, institutions, practices, heroes. But the ultimate target is man himself.
Attack human nature itself.
By attacking the character and morals of man himself, and by bringing about, through contamination of youth, a general degraded feeling, command of the populace is facilitated. The goal is to degrade people to the point where any sudden action toward him will place him in a state of shock.
Make them fragile, susceptible to shock.
It references horrifying experiments on German prisoners after 70 days of abuse. The least emotion toward the prisoner would bring about a state of shock beyond his endurance threshold, making him hypnotically receive anything said to him.
Implying a degraded, traumatized population is easily reprogrammed.
That's the implication. Systematically degrade them, make them servile.
And the first step is degrading the idea of man.
Exactly. Reduce man from a spiritual being to an animalistic reaction pattern. Make him think of himself as just a mechanism without individuality. Individual reactions, those are signs of mental derangement. Rebels aren't dissenters. They're deranged persons needing psychopolitical treatment.
Turn dissent into a medical problem.
And this degradation program should specifically target the military. Make them believe the disobedient one must be subjected to mental treatment. Educate youth into the animalistic nature of man. Frown on ideas, on individual effort. Make psychology training compulsory, supervised by an operative. Shape the next generation from the start.
And this systematic degradation ties into attacking religion, too.
Directly. Another fundamental pillar to be dismantled. Religion offers competing loyalty, competing morality. So, each and every branch and activity of each and every church must be discredited.
How?
Religion must become unfashionable by demonstrating broadly that man is an animal. Make religion synonymous with neurosis and psychosis. pathologize faith itself.
And connect economic hardship to this.
Yeah, by interfering with the economics. To the degree that privation and depression come about, only minor shocks will be necessary to produce an obedient reaction or an hysteria. Economic distress makes people more vulnerable to psychological manipulation.
Okay, so if they're degrading individuals and attacking religion, how does the mental health system itself fit in? Chapter 9, the organization of mental health campaigns, details how that becomes a tool.
A primary tool for infiltration and control. It's a shocking proposal for turning something meant to help into an instrument of state power.
How do they suggest doing that?
Operatives should organize mental health clubs or groups, use them to spread the terrors of mental aberration, but also to exert legislative pressure against the government to secure adequately the position of the psychopolitical operative and get funding.
So front groups to gain power and money.
Exactly. And crucially, in direct opposition to the stated goal, no mental health movement with actual goals of mental therapy should be continued.
Get rid of actual help.
Actively exclude genuine healers. Priests, ministers, actually trained psychoanalysts, good hypnotists, dianoidists, they must be defamed and excluded as untrained, unskilled quacks.
Discredit anyone who might actually help people.
It even specifically targets Chinese acupuncture, saying it must be stamped out and discredited thoroughly as it has some efficacy. Any effective alternative is a threat. The psychopolitician must be the sole authority.
And they should use civic groups. Unknowing people.
Invite city officials, socialites, and other unknowing individuals to cooperate, yes, but only to finance better facilities for the psychopolitician by stressing how complex mental illness is. Basically, manipulate well-meaning people into funding the psychopolitical agenda.
And it outlines a way to discredit hostile groups trying to do actual mental health work.
A particularly insidious method. Send someone to that group for treatment. Midway through, secretly give them a quiet injection of peyote, mescaline, or other drug, or an electric shock.
Induce symptoms of insanity.
Right. Then report them to the police, get them incarcerated by psychopolitical operatives. This makes officialdom believe that this group drives individuals insane. It effectively shuts down the competition through sabotage.
That's pure evil, and the goal is expanding their facilities.
Expansion of facilities, psychiatric wards in all hospitals, national institutions, totally in the hands of psychopolitical operatives, clinics where youth can be contacted. It's about building a pervasive institutional network for control.
And these groups become a political force.
They form a political force, which can then legalize any law or authority desired for the psychopolitician, granting them legislative power through these front organizations, and to prevent new independent practitioners. Ensure psychiatrists and psychologists under their control have excessively long period of time training. Control the pipeline.
And the Vienna connection, psychoanalysis, how does that fit?
It positions Vienna as the home of psychopolitics since it was the home of psychoanalysis. Stressing psychoanalysis provides a vocabulary sufficiently poor to avoid recovery of psychopolitical implantations. It also stresses sex, which serves as adequate defamation of character, a handy tool to discredit opponents.
So using the history and language of psychoanalysis as cover.
Exactly. And it advises suborning judges too. Release propaganda about dope addiction, homosexuality, and depraved conduct on the part of the young to make judges react violently against youth, creating a harsher system they can exploit.
And the military infiltration again.
Yes. Get psychopoliticians, questioning pilots flying new planes, reviewing military plans. Use drugs to extract information without the afterknowledge of the soldier. This would entirely cripple any overt action toward communism. Constant, unseen espionage and sabotage at the highest levels.
And how is this all funded?
Requires millions, unless the government itself is cooperating. Best way. Through those mental health groups composed of leading citizens who have lobbying abilities, manipulate prominent citizens into funding their own nation's subversion.
Wow. The core directive then is?
Chillingly clear. Consistent effort to form and run countless mental health groups while simultaneously smashing out of existence by whatever means any actual healing group. It's an aggressive two-pronged attack. Eliminate real help while consolidating psychopolitical control over mental well-being.
Okay, so they've infiltrated, they're degrading people, attacking institutions. What happens when they get caught or attacked? Chapter 10, Conduct Under Fire, is like a self-preservation manual.
Exactly. A chilling playbook for how to defend the operation when scrutiny inevitably comes. If an operative is accused of being communist or of malpractice or attacked by injured families, the recommended conduct is calm and aloof. Project impenetrable expertise backed by the authority of many years of training.
Put on a professional front.
And have backup. Innumerable documents which assert enormously encouraging figures on the subject of recovery by reason of shock, brain surgery, drugs, and general treatment. And here's the kicker. Not one of these cases cited need be real, but they should be documented and printed in such a fashion as to form excellent court evidence.
Systematically fabricate evidence, manipulate the record.
Completely. To deflect scrutiny about the Vienna Connection, just explain it as a place of study for all important matters of the mind. Give it academic legitimacy.
And the best defense if attacked.
Immediately start calling into question the sanity of the person attacking him. Use the very stigma they've cultivated. Next best, assert authority. Then, provide those long and impressive figures, the fabricated ones, to validate psychiatric practices.
Turn the tables, attack the accuser's sanity.
And the most extreme measure, though it warns it's dangerous, the actual removal of the attacker by giving him or them treatment sufficient to bring about a period of insanity for the duration of the trial.
Weaponize psychiatry to silence critics by literally incapacitating them. That's terrifying.
It really is.
Does it say anything about murder or violence?
It advises Psychopolitics should avoid murder and violence unless it is done in the safety of the institution on persons who have been proven to be insane. If suspicious deaths occur in institutions, use defamatory data to discourage inquiry, deflect attention.
So violence is okay if it's hidden within the system, against those already labeled insane.
That's the horrifying implication. And the goal is to normalize this violence. After a period of indoctrination, a country will expect insanity to be met by psychopolitical violence. It even suggests making it illegal for electric shock and brain surgery to be omitted in the treatment of a patient.
Mandate the brutality, remove any choice for less invasive care. And how do they keep these practices hidden, besides fabricated data?
Obscure with jargon. A great complexity should be made of psychiatric, psychoanalytical, and psychological technology. Burden hearings with terminology too difficult to be transcribed easily. Use vague terms like schizophrenia, paranoia, these relatively undefinable states.
Make it incomprehensible to outsiders.
Right. And exaggerate the terribleness of insanity itself, its threat to the society, until the court sees the psychopolitician as vitally necessary for protection.
Create fear to justify their power, and that slogan.
The ultimate slogan to implant. It should become well known that only the insane attack psychiatrists. And critically, that definition of paranoia again. Paranoia is a condition in which the individual believes he's being attacked by communists, making critics seem delusional by definition.
A perfect defense mechanism, and suppressing real therapy is part of this defense.
Crucial. Part of the effective defenses should include the entire lack in the society of any real psychotherapy. This must be systematically stamped out, since a real psychotherapy might possibly uncover the results of psychopolitical activities.
Genuine healing is a threat because it might expose their manipulations.
Wow. So any whisper against them
should be laughed into scorn, branded an immediate hoax, and its perpetrator or publisher should be branded an insane. And by the use of drugs, the insanity should be confirmed. It even boasts about pre-implanted confessions in Russian trials, showing the ultimate outcome.
Okay, and if attacking mental health wasn't enough, Chapter 14, the smashing of religious groups, goes after religion directly.
Directly. It sees religion as another fundamental pillar, a competitor for loyalty and morality that needs to be dismantled.
How does it frame this?
It claims that until recent times, the complete subject of mental derangement was the sphere of activity of the church and only the church. It argues these new scientific practices in mental health wouldn't last without official insistence, because people would naturally turn back to clergy. So religion is the natural default they need to overcome.
And they need to hide the truth. It must be carefully hidden that the incidence of insanity has increased only since these scientific practices were applied. Blame it on the pace of modern living instead. Deliberate misdirection.
And target religious institutions that do offer care.
Religious sanitariums must be discredited and closed no matter what the cost. Why? Because their actual recovery figures might become known, exposing the failures of the psychopolitical institutions.
To eliminate evidence of successful alternatives.
And recruit every agency of the nation into a foaming hatred of religious healing. Suborn DAs, judges, medical groups into believing religious mental healing is vicious, bad, insanity-causing, intolerable. Turn the system against spiritual care.
And the goal is?
Explicit. You must work until religion is synonymous with insanity. You must work until the officials, will not think twice before they pounce upon religious groups as public enemies.
Equate faith with insanity. Make officials see religious groups as the enemy.
And it notes, cynically, it is not necessary to convince the masses. It is only necessary to work incessantly upon the official, using lies, defamation, false evidence, propaganda. Control the authorities. You control the populace.
And that chilling analogy.
We use the tree to climb, and then, strangling it, grow into power on the nourishment of its flesh. A parasitic strategy, total subversion.
Okay, so after all these offensive strategies, the document lists things to avoid. Chapter 15, proposals which must be avoided. These are essentially countermeasures, right? Things that could stop them.
Exactly. It's a warning system for the operative. Details the damaging movements that could interrupt their conquest. Anything that could expose or counteract their methods.
Like what?
Like proposals to return the insane to clergy care that must be fought on the grounds of incompetence and the insanity brought about by religion. Laws protecting the insane, fought to the extreme on the grounds that only violent measures can succeed. Such laws, it admits, could cause the whole program to very possibly collapse.
That reveals a key vulnerability. Due process, patient rights.
Absolutely. Increase surveillance or legal steps for commitment release. Discourage that. Claim emergency to bypass due process. Instead, push for a psychiatric detention ward in every hospital. Ubiquitous control points.
And keep their own writings secret.
Prevent disclosure of psychopolitical writings like this textbook. Use actual security and complex verbiage to make it incomprehensible. And crucially, recovery and debt figures from institutions. Never be announced. Obscure the consequences.
What about investigations into cures?
Immediately be discouraged and last to scorn. Mobilize all operatives to fabricate a tremendous number of cures to counter any real inquiry. If an operative's communist links are exposed, blame his own carelessness, brand him an eccentric, isolate the individual, protect the network.
And authors exposing mind control.
Must be helped toward infamy or suicide to discredit their works. A horrific way to silence critics.
Wow. Anything else to fight against?
Any move to liberalize healing practices, fight it. All healing must stay at authoritative levels. Movements to improve youth, invaded and corrupted to disrupt campaigns against delinquency, addiction, promiscuity, basically sabotage positive social initiatives. Protect communist media workers by attacking their attackers with psychopolitics, and persuade the media to publicize psychopolitical benefits as science.
Use the media as a propaganda arm.
Ensure psychologists are not excluded from the armed services, maintain that infiltration. Inquests into suspicious deaths or derangement of political leaders must be conducted only by psychopolitical operatives or their dupes. Control the narrative.
And finally, violence against attackers.
Explicitly forbidden. Violence against communism attackers, eschewed as forbidden. Instead, defamation and the accusation of insanity alone should be employed. Psychological destruction is preferred, harder to prove, harder to fight.
Okay, so bringing all of this together, after all these tactics, these defenses, what is the grand endgame? Chapter 11, the use of psychopolitics in spreading communism, spells it out right. The ultimate goal.
It really does. It states explicitly that conquering a nation by communism depends upon imbuing its population with communistic tenets. But here's the key. It's not necessary that the term communism be applied at first.
It's about a subtle ideological shift, unacknowledged.
Exactly. A slow transformation of core beliefs. How? Infiltrate education. Alter works by William James and others. Insert Marx, Pavlov, Lamarck, dialectical materialism into psychology textbooks. And the document makes the audacious claim. Every chair of psychology in the United States is occupied by persons in our connection.
Ensuring total indoctrination through the education system.
Leads right to pushing for compulsory psychology classes, which it equates with social studies in high schools and universities. Why? So that eventually, when faced with a choice, people see communism as much more reasonably than in capitalism, which will now be of our own definition.
Reshape the intellectual landscape so your ideology seems like the only logical choice, based on definitions you created.
That's the plan. Not winning debates, but controlling the framework of thought itself.
And while the focus is psychological, Chapter 12, Violent Remedies, gets back to the physical side, making brutality acceptable.
Yeah, it asserts that populaces in general understand that if violence is necessary in the handling of the insane, which makes violent remedies seem to be reasonable. It talks about a gradual increase in brutality, from straitjackets to more and more cruelty.
Normalizing it step by step.
Desensitizing society. Brain operations should become standard and commonplace, with deaths repressed, hidden. The public should be gradually educated about electric shock's harms, first therapeutic, then quieting, then injuring spine teeth, finally that it often kills or at least breaks the spine and removes violently the teeth.
Why tell them the harms?
To bring them to a level where witnessing such brutality is expected, accepted as necessary, the ultimate aim, the creation of zombie conditions to such a degree that they will probably employ zombies, is given to them, reducing rebellious people to mindless labor.
A fully subjugated population, literally zombies. Chilling.
And convince the public that insanity can only be met by shock, torture, deprivation, defamation, discreditation, violence, maiming, death, punishment in all its forms. Promote increasing insanity to create an emergency, positioning the psychopolitician as the savior with the necessary harsh tools.
Exploit crisis for power. Classic.
Textbook, you might say.
Okay, but who does this? Given the sheer depravity, who become the psychopolitician? Chapter 13, The Recruiting of Psychopolitical Dupes, explains how they get these agents.
It describes training people for complete obedience, often using mild drugs or shock for pain drug hypnosis to make them pliable. And recruitment is made very attractive, financially and sexually.
Appealing to base desires.
Exactly. It claims the amount of promiscuity which can be induced in mental patients can work definitely to the advantage for recruiting agents. Lurid sexual contacts, properly witnessed, can thereafter be used as blackmail material.
Exploit patients, create blackmail material to control recruits. Deeply cynical.
Absolutely. And the promises made to these recruits, they reveal the dark incentives. The promise of unlimited sexual opportunities, the promise of complete dominion over the bodies and minds of helpless patients, the promise of complete lawlessness without detection.
Power, sex, impunity.
And since the psychopolitician controls the insane, many with criminal tendencies, they can recruit for his ranks the criminals themselves. This gives them unlimited numbers of human beings to employ on whatever project he may see fit. The insane, it claims, will execute destructive projects without question, under punishment and implantation.
A shadow army of manipulated patients and criminals, directed by this elite.
For societal destruction and control, that's the vision.
So finally, Chapter 16, in summary, it brings all these chilling threads together. How does it justify all this?
It frames psychopolitics as critical in an era of unlimited weapons, arguing its success prevents atomic war, a less destructive alternative.
Conquest of the mind instead of nuclear annihilation.
Right. It claims the spread of communism has never been by force of battle, but by conquest of the mind. In psychopolitics, we have refined this conquest to its last degree, positioning it as the ultimate, most sophisticated warfare.
And the justification for the horrific means.
Simple. The end thoroughly justifies the means. It claims the degradation of populaces is less inhuman than their destruction by atomic fission, for to an animal who lives only once, any life is sweeter than death.
Twisted logic. Reducing human value to mere biological existence makes psychological subjugation seem preferable to death.
Exactly. The ultimate goal is portrayed as worthy. If a people can be conquered in the absence of war, the end of war will have been achieved without the destruction of war.
Peace through total mental conquest.
And the reward for the psychopolitician, laid bare in the nearly unlimited control of populaces, in the uninhibited exercise of passion, and the glory of communist conquest over the stupidity of the enemies of the people.
A vision of absolute total control, godlike power over minds and nations.
Achieved not on battlefields, but in the dark corridors of the mind. That's the final picture it paints. #Psychiatry.
Wow. Okay. This deep dive into the alleged Russian textbook on psychopolitics, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It certainly has.
It presents this world where just the very fabric of society, education, mental health, family, loyalty can be systematically twisted, manipulated towards this one single controlling agenda. It's a chilling read, really chilling, regardless of, who actually wrote it or what their real intent was, because it lays out this blueprint for subversion so meticulously.
Indeed. What really stands out, I think, is that relentless focus on perceived human vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
The desire for peace, economic fears, the trust we place in authority figures, even personal vices like sexuality. It's just a strategic manual for how to exploit all of that for societal control.
And all framed within this terrifying ethical vacuum where the state justifies absolutely anything.
Any atrocity. And this document, whether it's authentic or maybe just a really sophisticated piece of Cold War propaganda, it definitely taps into those universal anxieties we have about hidden influence, about mind control.
Which definitely still feels relevant today.
Absolutely. And it raises this really important question for all of us, for you listening today. How can you better discern sources, narratives that try to shape your perceptions, especially when they present such extreme views, such extreme methods?
Right. What's our responsibility in critically assessing the facts we encounter, particularly when they involve these claims of hidden influence of control?
Exactly. And maybe how can understanding a document like this, even if it's deeply disturbing, maybe help us in that ongoing critical assessment of the information landscape we navigate every single day?